All right, guys, we are back again with the COVID cabal. Back again with the COVID cabal. What is up? What is up? It's been too long. I'm gonna tell you guys that I want this to be happening more often. I want more COVID cabals. I'm not saying we're going back to 2020, but I want more COVID cabals. I would love to get this to the point where we're doing one per week. That would be amazing for me. I'm not promising that right now, but I would love if we could get to the point where we're doing COVID Cabal once per week. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys want to return to the COVID Cabal? I can talk more about the foreign policy, the economic policy stuff. Um, there's still a bunch of conspiracy stuff out there. But if you guys are here, drop a comment. If you guys are here, drop a comment in the chat. I want to see it. Definitely want to see the comments in the chat. Also want to make sure the chat's working, so drop a comment, please, just so I can make sure everything's functioning properly. And we're gonna move into the wine that we have today. We got a wine today, and yeah. So if you're watching this, drop a comment in the chat real quick. What is going on here? What is going on here? Hold on a second. Where's this chat at? Okay, good. Good. Alan, good to see you. Yeah, I was worried a little bit about X. Something was going on here. And guys, I apologize, a little bit of delay. Masculine Millennial, good to see you, man. Apologize for a little bit of delay. It's I'm doing this right after calls. Sometimes client calls go on over. So let's get to the wine. All right, start off with the wine, just like we used to. This is a Cavaccina Chiaretto Bardolino. Okay, so this is a rosé, and the Chiaretto Bardolino comes from the Bardolino region, and Bardolino region is right around Lake Garda. So it's mostly using the Corvino grape, like a Valpolicella. And this is not an easy wine to get around here. You'll get Valpolicella stuff all over the place, like a Valpolicella Ripasso, or the Amarone, which are all reds, and predominantly use a Corvina grape. Those are easy to find, but Bardolinos you don't find as much. So this is a little bit of a niche wine. It's a bougie wine. It's a tariffed wine. Okay, I bought this before the tariffs, stocked up before the tariffs. But let's just try it real quick. So this is great. So the way that these rosés work. So you have two ways of making rosé. The first way you make rosé is the Sanier method, which is basically they add red wine to more of like a white wine. It's a cheaper method of doing it, right? They do that to increase the color. The best rosés are just first press. That's all they are. They're the first press. Romeo, what's up, man? They're the first press of a red wine. So like a Pinot Noir rosé, for instance, the first press of the juice goes into a rosé. So it has like a pink color, but it's not, as you do more presses, you get more of the color, more of the tannin in. But the first one, there's less color in it. So those are the best rosés, the best expressions of the grape. They're like a red wine, except they've taken away all the tannin in it, or virtually all the tannin. So let's try it. It smells phenomenal, honestly. This is like orange zest, strawberries. Just beautiful. Just beautiful. If only it was a beautiful day, but it's just beautiful. I love early spring, by the way, but it's been very rainy. All right. So is Ireland fucked? We'll do this little digression before we get into the main topic here. I am very bullish on really the entire Western world. I'm bullish on the entire Western world. I'm not bullish in the short term on Western Europe. I think Europe, the European Union, and the Commonwealth in the next 5 years are going to be an absolute shit situation. Maybe it won't be the full 5 years, but the next few years, it's going to be really bad. There's just no question in my mind about it. It's going to be really bad because you guys are run by communists and people who hate you, people who hate your people who they hate European people, they hate Western civilization. So they absolutely would love to see your culture, your history, everything fall apart. But they're not going to succeed. That's what I mean when I'm saying I'm bullish. They're not going to succeed, guys. They're just not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. A fire is rising, and I don't know if you guys can see it. And I admit to myself that I tend to see these things too early in the sense that when I see the seeds of them, I can go so far and I can say, okay, well, I see the seeds. That means it's happening. Whereas it may actually take a little bit longer for that stuff to mature. Like many of the topics I've been talking about, I supported Trump from the very beginning. The topics in the dating relationship, universe that I've been discussing over the many years, a lot of my positions have become like standard manosphere positions. But that took years to happen. I saw it, the progress moving that direction, but it maybe took 5 more years for that to actually manifest, and maybe it'll take another additional 5 until, let's say, the war of the sexes really ends. Right now, it's extremely intensified, but I see the intensification as part of the victory. So it's the same thing with all the issues in Western countries. Um, yeah, it's the same thing with markets. I've done the same thing too. Fortunately, I haven't, some of the convictions that I made. I've made some bad decisions, but I bought silver and gold, and I think partly because they were hard to sell, I didn't sell them. So it's been really good to see that investment panned out because I was able to. I was early, but I didn't pull the plug too early. But to just show what Romeo is saying here. Problem is the EU politicians will double on everything. It's like the Dems came to Europe. Well, this is 100% correct, but they're gonna lose. There's nothing supporting this in the end. Like they're totalitarians, and they're pushing it so far, it's gonna backfire on them. And because they're pushing it so far, it's gonna backfire on them in a worse way. There is a point where people will just not take it any longer. And I'm sorry, but it's in our genetic memory to really be fighters, to be dangerous, to be innovative. Um, and look, for what it's worth, if you believe in this stuff, putting aside just the psychological trends, although I would argue that one is simply a reflection of the other, the astrology tells us that this stuff is going to be changing. Like we've been in since 2011, we have been in everything's been in Neptune. Like all the planets have been all the planets have been in Pisces. And Pisces is a very like feminine, dissolving, no borders, no boundaries, you know. So it's been this very like it's no surprise that it's been this very permissive, feminist, uh, don't stick up for yourself kind of era. And that's all changing. I mean, as of now, we're seeing a lot of these planets that have been in Pisces move into Aries, and by 2026, they're all going to be in Aries. And the outer planets, I mean, and these are planets of like Aries is the sign of masculinity and war and aggression. So you can see that masculinity is making and staying up for yourself and you know fuck people who try to mess with me or bad behavior. I'm not going to be ashamed. I'm not going to take it anymore. That's all coming. It's all coming. So we're going to be all right. I want to talk about, though, these tariffs. I want to talk about the tariffs. I want to talk about Canada. And we'll talk about the FBI stuff too, with the field office. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have been following it, exactly what's going on with the tariffs. I've always supported the tariffs just purely on economic merits for it. I know the federal government was a lot smaller, but we funded this country with tariffs. We've done it throughout the entire history of the country, all the way to 1913. We funded the country on tariffs. And the result of that has just been a really robust domestic market. I know people, I think you can make arguments for free trade, comparative advantage, right? Standard kind of capitalistic arguments. But we don't even have free trade. So they're kind of irrelevant in the case of what we've been dealing with now, because people say, well, Trump's against free trade, he's making tariffs. Like, we're being tariffed against. So really what Trump is trying to do in many ways is create free trade. It's not a protectionist trade policy. It's no different than protecting yourself when someone's trying to stab you, that you decide to poke back, right? Or fight back. So just on pure principles, I've always supported it because certain countries, America being one of them, have complete and total ability to have tariffs because we have huge amounts of natural resources. We have the biggest consumer market, and we have a workforce capable of generating everything we need. America could really be an autarkic state. Like, you talk about autarky, which is an economic model typically done by fascist countries during wartime, like Nazi Germany, for instance, was autarkic. And at one point, they became autarkic, right? Which is basically everything that Germany needs is going to be produced within Germany or within German-controlled territories. The problem for Germany during that time is that Germany had two of the three, right? They had a consumer market. Not that Germany was necessarily producing consumer goods, but let's say they had a market for industrial production. They certainly had the talented workforce to be able to produce that. What they didn't have was the natural resources. So if Germany had successfully taken over Russia, then Germany could have become an autarkic country. But really, in the world right now, the only two countries that mostly have the ability to be autarkic are Russia and the United States. And even Russia is at a disadvantage versus the United States because Russia's population is substantially smaller and its consumer market less robust. So all of this is to say that America, if you're talking about Belgium should not have tariffs, right? Should not have tariffs. But the United States can get away with it. And we need to do it because, as people have pointed out, most of the stock market is controlled by the top 10% of the country. And so the bottom half of the country doesn't even have a way of entering into the market. They don't have a way of buying homes at the current prices. So I support it for those reasons. Lower the asset prices, let other people be able to buy into it. The asset prices are all ballooned up anyway. But as people have pointed out, there's a lot more to Trump's tariff policy than simply, there's a lot more to it than simply reindustrializing America, generating tax income, which, by the way, it's supposed to be $700 billion in tariff income, which is pretty good, pretty good. And there's already talk, it's already pulling more investment into the country. But the other reason for doing this is that by having people leave the stock market and move into bonds, the bond yields are going down, bond prices are going down, which is in turn helping the United States to refinance the debt that Biden really, I mean, there was debt beforehand, don't get me wrong, but Biden in particular took on all this debt at extremely high rates, and all that stuff's coming mature this year. So Trump's trying to really diffuse a bomb in the economy, and we can say that, oh well, people don't understand this. I think a lot of them understand it. They're just pieces of shit. We're talking about pieces of shit, right? People who have absolutely no good faith. They are not interested in actually trying to solve problems, and they're profiteers. Because anybody who's operating in good faith will at least say, well, let's give it a shot. Let's at least see what happens. They're not gonna be making arguments about the stock market, especially when they weren't making those arguments during COVID, right? They didn't care during COVID when we shut down the world economy. So disingenuous people, usual clowns, usual mockingbird media. It is what it is. It's a smart plan. But the tariffs are also really important because of how, by having people move more investment into America and by buying US bonds and by affecting the trade deficits of these other countries, it's affecting the offshore dollar market. I'm going to talk about this a little bit because this is a really important element of things. A lot of how Davos, Bank of England, the Davos, the crown, right? How they have been able to mess with America and control America, use America, has been through the setting of the interest rates on American dollars. So, okay, we are the world's reserve currency and we benefit from that. But we're also, to some extent, at the mercy of the offshore dollar market. We don't have as much control over our currency because the dollar is in some ways a global currency. So for a long term, you had LIBOR, the London interbank overnight rate, just basically set the price of dollars around the world. That changed when the Federal Reserve moved over the SOFR. So SOFR is basically, I don't know what it stands for, but it's the same kind of thing, overnight rate, except it's in America. America is now setting, the Fed saying the rate of overseas dollars. So ever since that's happened, there's been all sorts of counterattacks, and I think you can see a lot of what's going on in Canada right now as, Mark Carney, who, by the way, okay, so a little bit of background on Carney, Rhodes Scholar, Tavistock Institute. Okay, so all the sort of deep state, groomed for public office, groomed to be one of their little henchmen. He's one of those guys, and it's no surprise also that he's got a trans kid because that's just what they do, right? That they have to have their little sacrifice, their little signal of loyalty. So Carney, governor of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada, now unelected Prime Minister of Canada, will probably get elected. And I'll talk about the election in a second. But just to finish the thought on the economics, a lot of what Canada's role in this sort of global plan to undermine Trump is to have Canada operate as a essentially offshore dollar market. So Canada has like a $300 billion trade surplus with the United States, which they are able to then use to create bonds, overseas bonds that can be, they can turn that into dollar denominated debt that undermines in turn the Fed's ability to set rates to get people to invest in American bonds. So a lot of this has to do, and I don't think it's the only part of the war, and Tom Luongo is the one who's pioneered a lot of this thesis, and I continually think it's a really interesting understanding of things. But there's no question that Canada is going to be sacrificed in the process to undermine America. Let's talk about Canada. Canada is I'm just going to be blunt. It's a fake country. Okay? It's going to piss off Canadians when I say this. Some Canadians will understand what I mean. It's a country that was created to not be America. Their identity is simply that we're not American. They don't have a core identity themselves. And from the very beginning, they've been taken advantage of. They've been left in a hierarchical British system rather than a Republican system. And really, Canada has been neglected by the crown for a very, very long time. They have like a Stockholm syndrome kind of identity with them. And the country was only even developed at all because after the Civil War, it seemed plausible that they might join the Union. So, when I say join the Union, I mean after the Civil War, there was a lot of sympathy for the Union. So, when the Union won the Civil War, there was some concerns that Canada might end up being pulled into the United States simply because the United States had so much energy, this westward expansion energy, this industrial energy. Canada didn't have any of that. They had no infrastructure. So they gave him a charter of rights, but it was not, rather than having them be inalienable rights given to them by God, they were um, rights that were given to them by the crown, which meant, of course, that they were rights that could be taken away from the crown. So Canada has always been held in this sort of limbo, and I don't really particularly think that their hating of America is particularly different from the American left's hating of America. Um, Only slightly different in the sense that, elbows up, they can claim some sort of past, you know. Look, Canada's done some beautiful things. Uh, It's a beautiful people. Okay, I'm just talking about this identity. They're in this sort of limbo stage, and they've always been in a limbo stage. And because the recent governments have flooded the country with so many people from the third world, that identity is even more fragmented, and it's not really clear with the younger Canadian that younger Canadians even really know what Canada is. And I do think it's mostly the boomer Canadians who have polls have shown are the only ones that continue supporting the Liberal Party by large amounts. They don't care about the migration. They don't care about anything. They just want their home prices to keep going up. Honestly, when I saw this, I was like, I love our boomers because our boomers are bad. Our boomers are nothing like the Canadian boomers. The Canadian boomer has got to be one of the worst people on the fucking planet because the Canadian boomer really does not care about the entire country going to shit. Does not care at all. So, younger Canadians though don't really have that same sense of pull. Okay, so let's talk about what's going to happen to Canada. So, there's a lot of back and forth with the tariffs with Canada. Is Trump going to keep them? Is he not? They made some statement recently that Canada's offers to drop tariffs if Trump drops them. Canada didn't make that offer. Doug Ford, that fat fuck out of Ontario, made that offer. Now, of course, Ontario is the most powerful province, but and maybe there's some, operating as a proxy for the Canadian government. But the same blowhard guy who says I'm going to stop sending energy to America, and then he never follows up on that, and then goes and says Canada's ready to negotiate. Like, you're not running the country, so just like I don't. I think it's just a fake headline, basically, another thing to manipulate exactly what's going on. So I'm gonna put this on stage too, by the way, because what Alistair said is very correct. Beware of the maple boomer. Beware the maple boomer. It's a true statement here. So what's gonna happen? Well, Alberta is really done with this stuff. And I think it's likely that Carney's going to win at the end of the month when Canada has an election. And that means he's going to get, a mandate for how many years. Carney is way worse than Trudeau. Not that they aren't cut from the same cloth, but Trudeau is really meant to be the face of kind of more wokeism. He was supposed to. He was the one who really pulled a lot of the Canadian boomers off the cliff because they all were obsessed with his father. So there's like an emotional trigger. Like Pierre Trudeau was like was like molded into some sort of figure of masculinity. So, Lady Boy Justin comes on the scene, and they still have all these reflections of the great Trudeau family. But Carney is really, because of his banking expertise, the Canadian economy will be totally wrecked to become a shadow banking place of offshore dollars for the rest of Europe. And the thing is, if Canada spends its trade surplus doing that, it's going to create terrible economic distress within Canada. So the question really is Canada going to survive this ordeal? I don't think Canada's ever going to become the 51st state. And I actually think the proposition, I agree with it from like a rhetorical perspective. It's also very simple, very Trumpian in that sense. There's no way Canada's going to become a 51st state. Canada is a very big country geographically with very different people. And there's no way, just saying this, there is no way Canada enters the Union of the United States as anything less than 7 states. Okay? Every province is going to be a state, and the Maritimes and Newfoundland could combine to be a state. But that's as consolidated as you're going to get. You're not going to have it all as one state. It's never going to happen, because there's also just too much division within Canada itself. And it doesn't even make sense from an orders of operations standpoint, because the way that you get Canada into the Union is to first break apart Canada and pick it up piece by piece. And that is what I think is a very high likelihood of happening with Alberta. Alberta is done with the Liberal government. They're done with having all their money and resources extracted. Alberta, since the 1960s, I think has paid like just shy of $700 billion in remittances to Ottawa in terms of net remittances. So they have almost like $750 billion has gone from Alberta to the rest of Canada. And Alberta hasn't got any of the infrastructure development that it's wanted, the ability to refine its oil on its own, the ability to send the oil to the coast. The irony is, because of all the environmentalism of the Liberal Party in Canada, that Alberta is now, there's been no ability to send Alberta's resources anywhere but the United States. Even to send energy across to Eastern Canada has to go through the United States. So unless Carney makes major concessions to Alberta, Alberta is probably going to call an independence referendum. And if that goes ahead and the United States recognizes Alberta's independence, you are going to see probably Alberta join the United States. You probably see it happen. Alberta would come to the United States as a red state, certainly under these conditions, right? Maybe it wouldn't say blood red state, but it come in as a red state. So you wouldn't have to worry about it from a political standpoint, and it would come in with tons of wealth. And you'd probably start to see everything fall apart from there. Saskatchewan would then follow Alberta. Quebec would probably make more moves to go its own way. Quebec's the kind of country that would maybe be cleaned up last, or it may not ever fully enter as a state. It's hard to say how these things will end up unfolding. I think that they'll all end up coming under the same banner. But I want to keep this in mind, that I don't know exactly if it's going to be under the exact same structure as the United States is right now. Will the U.S. end up being a lot more decentralized when all is said and done? And is that going to allow there to be all these different states? But the point I'm trying to make here, that I want you to understand, is that Carney gets elected and does not grant these major concessions to Alberta, then Alberta is probably out. And if Alberta's out and US recognizes it, what is Canada going to do to stop Alberta? They can't militarily intervene, because then the United States can say, we are going to protect Alberta's independence. Alberta at that point understands that they have to become a state, and they do, because as a state, they still have so much more fiscal capabilities on their own. They're not going to have all their money taken from them by Washington. It's not how it works. Alistair's also got a great comment here. Carney has significant CCP connections, just had a big info op from Beijing revealed, trying to sway Chinese Canadian voters to support Carney. He's a pure-blood globalist. Absolutely. And a lot of what Trump's doing is also trying to flush out the CCP connections, because Canada is really becoming owned. It's basically owned between the Chinese and between Davos at this point. Um, British Columbia in particular is owned by the Chinese, and that's an interesting issue because Alberta leaves, British Columbia is then separated from the rest of Canada. I don't see British Columbia, because of at least what's going on in Vancouver, voluntarily wanting to join the United States. So you get into all sorts of issues about like what happens. Like things could get very messy, and we'll see how it goes. It's fun to imagine various military scenarios, not like people actually getting killed, but it's fun to imagine, gunboat diplomacy and whatnot. And I'm not saying it's never in the background implicit, but ultimately money directs a lot of these things. Money and intelligence, and I think a lot of where this stuff goes is going to depend on what sort of things get revealed in Washington. So I think this is a good opportunity to move us to the last piece of this conversation today, which is what's going on in the FBI. What's going on with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino? Is everything okay? So the J6 community is really freaked out right now because this guy Steven Jensen, who called us a bunch of terrorists when he worked at the FBI, still works at the FBI. There's all this stuff that's come out that looks to be true. It's gone back and forth, but looks to be true, that he was to be promoted to the head of the FBI field office in Washington. And this is like unacceptable, obviously, to J6ers and to really anybody else who's, MAGA, because this is a guy who seemingly supported the weaponization of government against American citizens. What is this person being promoted for? Well, I think that it's important that we get answers. There's no reason to just give blind faith, blind support. I don't believe in that. I don't think it's smart. However, and I don't know how to exactly to put this, but I don't feel like Cash and Dan are betraying us. I don't get the sense that that's what's happening. Not even with Pam Bondi, with all the Epstein stuff. And I totally understand, appreciate feedback, pushback. This is not the argument I'm making here is unsubstantiated. It's very much I see that the way that they're operating and the things that they're doing, and it doesn't feel or appear to me, it only superficially appears the same as past betrayals. I know it's not really satisfying to people. It's the same thing with Trump and Israel. As Trump's being controlled by Israel, he's certainly trying to ensure the survival of Israel. I do not see Israel controlling Trump. I actually see lots of tension between Trump and Israel, at least Netanyahu and Israel, because supporting the survival of Israel and the protection of Israel is not the same thing as being controlled by Israel or supporting Zionist irredentist goals in the region. So with the FBI, it's the same kind of thing. And Dan came out. I think either today or yesterday with this long post and saying like, I know that this is a lot of these things don't look good. He wasn't specific, but he said, but I think he was referring to Jensen. He said a lot of things don't make sense to people from the outside, and I understand that, but you have to trust that things are going well and that this is happening for a reason and be patient. A lot of people don't have any time for that. I don't blame him. I think it's good that we have bad cops, you know what I mean? I think it's good that we have people who are pissed, aren't going to accept it, and are going to keep pushing back because a little bit of pressure is great. It's not how I feel though. And I'm going to tell you this. I believe in Cash and Dan. Cash had one of the harder. Cash and Hegseth probably had the hardest. Well, I don't know. That hardest appointments. Cash had a hard appointment, just like the entire group. He had a hard appointment getting in. Dan left a very, very cushy job. Dan has been completely outspoken on our side for years about everything going on. He had a really great job with a show that was extremely popular. He was asked to be Cash's right-hand man by President Trump. He took the move. It makes no sense to me that someone like Cash, who spent years being vilified as a conspiracy theorist, as somebody who wanted to dismantle the FBI, somebody who wanted all these arrests, who knew where the, so to speak, knew where the bodies were buried, had supported Trump, protected Trump during the first turn against all these intelligence agency attacks. One of the few people you could really trust as a loyalist. It makes no sense to me that these two individuals, when they got in there, they're just like, with Trump having so much energy and so much really taking it to the left, that they would just backstab. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't see it. I don't see it's what's going on. Now, do I see that they are facing roadblocks and obstruction within the FBI in that there's certain things that they wanted to release that when they got into the position and maybe had a bigger picture of awareness, realized that they couldn't do all that they wanted to do? Absolutely. I absolutely see that. I think when you're on the outside, you say, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to release this. And then you get in there and you see it and you're like, fuck, this actually implicates so many different people. And it's not even at that point that you're not going to release it, but you realize that you can't just release it. That there has to be some deals that maybe you can use it. Maybe when you have access to this information, you can start to turn people around. I'll give you an example. Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is a piece of shit. Nobody likes Lindsey Graham. He's absolute scum. So, and he's neocon scum. Certainly has hated MAGA. Certainly has backstabbed Trump. So, if that's all true, then ask yourself, why did Lindsey Graham all of a sudden, just like on a fucking dime, he flipped and was like, Zelensky's bad. We're gonna stop giving money to Ukraine, not supporting Zelensky anymore. What? This is somebody who's like, let's make a statue for Zelensky. Absolutely love Zelensky. Pro everything, the biggest warmonger you could possibly look at, right? All of a sudden, he doesn't want to send money to Ukraine, doesn't like Zelensky. Trump endorses him for the Senate in 2026. A lot of people in the commentator class, in like the MAGA commentator class, will be like, Trump's selling out to the swamp. This is not good. Lindsey's terrible. Lindsey has to go. Look, Lindsey's obviously terrible, but is it possible that Trump just controls Lindsey Graham now? Is it possible that when we got control of the intelligence agencies, that we got information, all the blackmail, Lindsey has to do what we say now? It doesn't. I'm a principled person. I want South Carolina. I want politics to be based on people who care about the people getting elected, moving forward. That's not politics. It's not politics. It's not national politics, and it's not state politics. State politics are dirty. You know, you look at Florida, really well-run state. A lot of bad stuff going on with DeSantis, right? Not in terms of how he's governed vis-a-vis the people, but in terms of, political concentrating political power to yourself, abusing. I mean, look, whether you like Andrew Tate or not, for instance, it's neither here nor there to threaten someone with, an investigation because you don't like them and they're living in your state. Like that's I don't have any time for that stuff as someone who's been harassed by the government. I find that stuff really disgusting, and I think it shows bad political instincts, maybe, but also character. You look at Texas, there's a lot of dirty things going on in Republican Texas, right? A lot of very, very permissive behavior related to the border. Um, whole migrant city being created right under the legislature's nose. There's a lot of things going on. Like right now, there's a coup where a bunch of the rhinos, they elected a rhino speaker of the House in the Texas legislature with the Democrats. What about Kentucky? Oh, well, we have Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, big principled conservatives. Well, I mean, look, I'm not making a black and white statement here. I hope you guys understand, because I do respect that Massey hasn't sold out to APAC. But Massey, at the same time, Massey and Rand Paul both, certified the 2020 election. They went at, they criticized people saying the 2020 election wasn't stolen. If you said the 2020 election was stolen, they said no, it wasn't stolen. Kentucky's also where Mitch McConnell came from. It's also one of the big Obamacare states. I mean, there's a lot of, like, nothing's meets the eye. The point is that the state politics are also very corrupt. They're very corrupt. Just a corrupt institution. Probably is always a little bit corrupt. Maybe it's worse now than it had been. So when I say all this stuff, what do I mean? What's the point of it all? The point is that it's possible that Cash and Dan at the FBI, including Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice, and Ed Martin, who's the deputy district attorney for DC, great guy, that these individuals really are interested in reform, and they do want to get it, but there are deals being made, people who are being flipped. I mean, for the record, you wouldn't have even gotten any of those people through to begin with if there wasn't already leverage over these people, right? There's just no way it would have happened, because they're all too much of a threat to the establishment. So how were they able to do it? There was enough leverage. There was enough leverage that a lot of people in Congress who we would wish to go down are not going to go down. They're not going to go down because they played ball at the moments that they had to play ball on. And eventually they'll be allowed to retire into the sunset with the money they took. It's not right. It's not any different than what happened with Putin in Russia. I mean, when Putin took over in Russia, he put the oligarchs in a room and he said, you can keep what you stole, but you have to work for Russia now. Unfortunately, it's how intelligence agencies and politics and all that stuff come together. So what I first thought when I heard that this guy, Steve Jensen, was going to get a promotion was that he flipped. Was that he was being put in that position because they have gotten a lot of, they've been gaining information about what happened with January 6th from him. Now, I've heard from Julie Kelly that it's not, not that this guy Jensen was a good guy, but that some of the stories about him may have been a little bit overblown, right? Not like that he had his own kind of hesitations about stuff going on, and um, I don't know, and to some extent, I don't care because what I care about is that justice is ultimately being done in the aggregate as much as we can possibly get. The real henchmen responsible for January 6th, the 2020 election threat, the weaponization of government that comes forward. And the bottom line is that it's not happening in Congress, right? We have Loudermilk, who wants to have his committee to explore January 6th, and it's being stymied. And there's rumors who's doing it. Some people have rumored that it was Jim Jordan. I don't know that it's Jim Jordan. I don't. Um, I'm inclined to disbelieve that simply because there was so much opposition to Jim Jordan becoming Speaker of the House, which in itself is not, necessarily the full picture because that could just be factions fighting over power. You know what I mean? But my sense is that they didn't want Jim Jordan there because Jim Jordan, might have exposed it. I don't want to give too much credit. I'm just saying that I'm not going to believe the rumor off the bat. I think Mike Johnson certainly has been an empty suit. Mike Johnson has. I'm not saying that he's like a bad guy. He's certainly better than McCarthy. So I think we have to view things in perspective. But Congress is totally compromised. It's totally compromised right now. So I'm withholding judgment. I'm hearing rumors that they are really actually things have flipped a lot on the inside. And I'm not saying I've heard rumors from like, Q Plan Truster, whatever account where mass arrest happening right now. I mean, I'm hearing it from people who actually have contacts in the DOJ, in the FBI, who have been talking, who have been in Capitol Hill, who have been talking that there are indeed investigations going on behind the scenes. And I'll tell you, that's what my heart says too. Because Trump right now has gone all in. So to me, like people who are saying, he's not doing it. Trump's, owned. Like, there's too much on. He's been like a fucking bullet grazed by his face. Like Trump is all in. He's all in. Like there is no other option but to start arresting people. And I understand it's not happening as fast as people would like, but we are not even 3 months into this presidency. And there has been so much that's happened. There's been so much that's changed. I mean, people are just they're losing perspective. And I don't know whether it's because, like, I don't know if it's just this because a lot of J6ers went through the same stuff and they don't have the same perspective. But, like, man, I'm patient. Like, after 2020, we're on these COVID cabals, right? We're like, it's March 15th, first COVID cabal, mass arrest happening by Easter. Like, I'm gonna learn from my mistakes. these things take time, you know. I look back on that and I'm like, oh, I was way ahead of myself. Um, but you can see it now. You can see this stuff is all set up. And if I had to guess, I think this is a good way to. I'll talk a little bit about Ukraine, but I think it's a good way to close this. If I had to guess, we're looking at a lot of these arrests happening in the fall, or at least the more publicized arrests happening in the fall. I don't have anything to back this up except for a little bit of astrology, but It's, to be honest, a little bit more of my just my sense, and I hold it like so lightly. I want to tell you how lightly I hold this. I'm throwing it out there for entertainment purposes because this is an entertainment show, right? We're having fun. That's what we're doing. I think you will really start to see more public evidence of arrests starting in the fall. And that a lot of the drama that we thought was happening before is really going to be kicking off all the way until July 2026. You know, like I think the real like revolution, the real like veil being pulled down, all that stuff, all the people getting arrested, it's coming. But you got to make sure all your ducks are in a row. You can't rush this stuff. It's better to, they're the ones who are at the strategic disadvantage, not us. I mean, it doesn't mean we don't have forever. Doesn't mean we have forever. But it's much better for us to do this decisively, and you have to get the right personnel in place. We're taking back very deeply captured institutions. This is a lot more complicated than I think a lot of people realize. And it's a lot more dangerous, and there's a lot of deals that have to be struck to get the main players, the main evil. And Elvis, I think that you like what you just said here is so like if we can just like take this to heart right now. We were ahead of ourselves because most of us are good-hearted people who want a peaceful life without uncertainty. And I'd say that, we also didn't understand how so much of this stuff works. We've had to be groomed into this big fight until it's become a part of us, you know? Um, and so, like, on a related note with the economy, we're definitely going to have a bounce back from right now. And I am super bullish on America. Do I think that the dips that we've had right now are the end? I don't. The housing crisis also has a big bubble that needs to pop. So I think on paper we probably do get a really, really deep recession. And look, all the Davos, China, they may try to make everything worse for us. They're gonna, cut off their nose to spite their face, because if they can make things bad for Trump, maybe they think that they can get him out. It'll probably just work against them. But I would be very bullish on America. Very bullish on America because we're getting our house in order. But do I think that what's going on right now with this market dip is the end? No, I don't. I think it's going to get worse. But remember that the market going down in this context, the real estate market going down in this context, doesn't mean the actual fundamental economy is going down. It's just this is a controlled demolition of an overinflated asset market. And we'll just close out here talking a little bit about Ukraine. So have Romeo here in the chat talking about a Ukrainian friend of his that he knew when he was out in Ukraine himself has finally been grabbed from his apartment in Lviv, and they found him after him hiding there for 2 years, and they press ganged him, and now he is going to war after 45 days of training, or he will finish those 45 days of training and then will be sent off to war. And this is more stuff that's going on from Ireland. And they don't really care, right? Like honestly, I gotta say this. At what point does ignorance become like At what point can you just say that you're just like a fucking idiot who doesn't know what's going on and it's not your fault? Like, you can't be vehemently supporting a policy and have no idea about it, no idea of the cost, no idea of the implications. Just I don't respect it. So, Ukraine has been totally fucked up, and it's going to get more and more fucked up. Um, Russia has strategic advantage across the entire front in Ukraine right now, and things are moving slowly because it's a grind. From what I understand, because of drones, everything is monitored. So you just can't make rapid movement. I'm sure warfare is going to adjust to this, just like World War One trench warfare ended up evolving into World War II maneuver warfare. But right now, drone warfare has really made it trench warfare, and it's been very difficult to actually take ground. And, I don't know how many casualties Russia suffered, but I'm sure it's over 1,000,000. And I say casualties, I'm not saying deaths, but they've definitely suffered hundreds of thousands of dead at this point. And I would probably say Ukraine's about triple that. Ukraine has less to lose, or more. Yeah, they have less people that they can afford to lose. I do think the war is ultimately going to be won by Russia militarily, because even though America wants to negotiate with Russia, because America and Russia have more opportunities to work together than they do against each other. Like, Trump is trying to, he only has the ability militarily to deal with one front, and he wants that front to be China, which is the most important one. So he's trying to hand off Ukraine to Europe, because he also doesn't really care about it. Just trying to save face is really mostly in that area. He's trying to, deter Iran into not escalating things. Yeah, I don't think he wants war in Iran. He just wants to bring Iran and Israel to the negotiating table. Because America can only really afford to contain China, can't contain all three. We don't have the power to do that anymore. And even though Europe's trying to bait America into Ukraine, it's not going to work. It's more likely that NATO is going to end before that occurs. Even Poland is the only real country in Europe right now that has a military force capable of, like, really sustaining a ground force, and they don't want to get involved with this. If Poland doesn't want to get involved with it, you're going to be hard pressed to find the population of any other European country that'll even consider it. So I don't know what the end game is. Right now, Putin is just asking for recognition of those territories. I can't help but think in the end, it's going to be everything from the Kiev and Odessa east. He probably cuts off the rest because the rest doesn't have resources and just has hostile population. Maybe you have a rump Ukraine, but you can kind of see it. Like, it's the 4 territories that they've already had referendums in. And then it's east of the Dnieper, and then it's Odessa, and then it's Kiev. And I just, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But anyway, guys, it was good seeing you for this CABAL. And we will see you next time. Hopefully the world doesn't end before then. But it's exciting times to live in, and we're back. We're back with the CABAL, and we're back as Americans. America's back. The world's going to be joining us back, and we're just going to keep fighting and purging this rot. And the best is yet to come. I'll see you guys next time.